This story begins 2 years after the first film, and it takes place after World War II ended. Korpi's family had been killed in the Karelia region, which originally belonged to Finland, but after the war, that area came under Nazi control. By now, Korpi had become very wealthy because of all the gold he had found, so he left his country and entered the city of Karelia. He eventually located his old home, which was still standing exactly as it was after the war. Inside, Korpi found a picture of his family, his wife, and his 2 sons. Seeing the photo made him extremely emotional, and he stood there remembering them. He had come there with his truck. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a Siberian prison where a prisoner was being held. The prisoner was taken out, and we see that his name was Igor. General Richt had come to meet him. Richt explained that Igor had entered Finland with his Nazi unit, and on their way back, his team had burned down several villages. During that mission, Igor had murdered a family, a woman and her 2 sons, and in anger, he had chopped their bodies into pieces. But that family belonged to Tommy Korpi, a Finnish commando who had once killed 300 men by himself and become a legend. Now that Korpi had returned to their territory, Richt wanted Igor to eliminate him. Otherwise, Korpi would keep searching for them and kill even more people. Igor eventually agreed. On the other side, we see Korpi counting the wooden logs from his old house. He began separating them, picking out the good ones. He brought a machine with ropes and started tying and loading the logs onto his truck. This was hard work, but Korpi had always been the kind of man who did everything on his own. After gathering all the usable wood, he loaded it into the truck and burned the leftover scraps. Now, Korpi was ready to return home to rebuild his new house. Remembering his family, he left the area and began his long journey. He had to travel about 120 kilometers. While driving, Korpi looked at the photo of his family inside the truck. As he continued ahead, 2 officers suddenly stopped him. Korpi noticed another truck pulling up behind them, and he instantly understood that these people had no intention of letting him go. One officer approached, so Korpi showed him his license. That officer handed the ID to the man in the truck behind them, who turned out to be Igor. Igor checked the ID and confirmed that he was indeed a Tommy Korpi. Igor looked at the logs loaded on Korpi's truck and said, "From the legends I've heard about you, it seems like you really loved your old house. So, let's end everything along with that old house of yours." Then the officers began moving toward Korpi, and he watched them closely. One of the officers poured alcohol on the bottle to set it on fire, planning to blow it up, while another officer approached Korpi from behind with a gun, ready to kill him. As the 2 officers came close, Korpi suddenly opened his door and shot one of them right there, then reversed the truck and crushed the second officer behind him. After that, he drove away in his truck. But one officer managed to climb into his truck. Korpi fought him and knocked him unconscious. Meanwhile, Igor had sent one of his large trucks after Korpi. Korpi noticed that the soldier inside his truck had a gun, but it wasn't loaded. So, when the soldier regained consciousness, Korpi ordered him to load the bullets. Then, Korpi took the gun from him, and the truck continued speeding forward, while Igor's convoy followed just behind. Korpi eventually stopped at a spot, opened the truck, and the soldier attempted to run. The guards from Igor's truck caught up and shot the soldier dead. But then Korpi stepped out and began killing all of them one by one. After eliminating the guards, he aimed his gun directly at Igor's vehicle. Igor told one of his men to hand him a gun, but Korpi shot that soldier too. Igor had no weapon on him, so Korpi spared his life and simply punctured the tires of his vehicle. At this point, Korpi still had no idea that Igor was the one who killed his family. Korpi then continued driving away. Igor, furious, grabbed a radio and called in his special biker force. He ordered all of them to chase Korpi. After fixing his tire, Igor also sped off. Korpi changed his route to throw them off, but Igor quickly figured that out. He gathered his group of bikers and charged after Korpi at full speed. Soon, the bikers got close. Korpi fired at them, but their metal helmets protected them. Their bullets, however, did hit Korpi. One biker shot him and his truck veered into the bushes. Korpi was injured, but he still managed to get the truck back on the road. The bikers kept closing in. Korpi noticed one of them climbing onto the top of his truck. When the biker attacked, Korpi dodged his strikes and managed to throw him off. But the biker grabbed one of the truck ropes and attacked again. Korpi swung him around and threw him down just as Igor drove up and crushed him under his vehicle. Korpi kept driving. Another soldier aimed a shotgun at him, but Korpi caused an accident with his truck that killed the soldier instantly. But another biker had already climbed onto the truck roof. Korpi tried to shake him off, but the soldier managed to dangle Korpi out of the truck. Korpi maneuvered and killed the biker hanging outside, then grabbed another guard and threw him out as well. The guard got caught in the hanging rope. Korpi fed the rope into the machine, which pulled it tight and slit the guard's throat. Now, all the bikers were dead. Infuriated, Igor ordered an explosion that set Korpi's logs on fire. Korpi responded by strapping dynamite to the body of the guard still trapped in his truck. He threw the body onto Igor's car. Igor leapt out just before the explosion destroyed the vehicle completely. Korpi then drove into the forest and used leaves to put out the burning logs. Igor, still enraged, ordered his deadliest weapons to be sent after Korpi. Meanwhile, Korpi stopped to check the wooden logs in his truck. Some of them were slightly burnt. He poured water into his cooler, knowing he still had a long journey ahead. After feeding his dog, he rested for a moment. That's when he noticed that he had been hit by a bullet earlier, and the metal fragments had gone all the way inside his cheek. But he was still functioning perfectly fine. Korpi then saw planes overhead, the ones Igor had sent to hunt him down. He quickly put his dog back into the truck and started driving. Both planes flew past him. Korpi increased his speed, but one of the planes swooped down and attacked. Korpi swerved to avoid the shots and spotted a house with a garage. He drove into the garage to hide from the plane, but he knew he wouldn't be safe for long. Right in front of the garage, he saw a dense forest. Korpi also noticed a large wooden plank, which he placed on top of his truck. Above him, the pilots started performing maneuver tricks in their planes, and then fired missiles that blew the entire garage apart. But by then, Korpi had already escaped. The planes kept shooting at him, but the wooden plank shielded the truck. Korpi then drove straight into the forest. The planes struggled to track him among the trees. Korpi used this chance and accelerated. One of the planes decided to fly lower and finally spotted him. The pilot tilted the plane sideways and started firing directly at Korpi. Korpi slammed the brakes. The plane's wings smashed into the truck, and the aircraft was destroyed right there. Korpi realized no one was chasing him anymore, so he kept driving forward and was about to exit the forest. He stepped out for a moment to check if the second plane was around, but he couldn't see it anywhere, not even in the distance. Korpi left the forest and drove along the edge of the land, but the plane eventually spotted him and swooped toward him. It flew right in front of Korpi and started firing again, but this time, the pilot was out of bullets. The pilot, furious and just as crazy as Igor and Korpi, brought the entire plane down in front of Korpi's truck, checked his seatbelt, and jumped out. Korpi quickly snapped the rope holding his logs, stopped the truck, and dumped all the wood onto the road. The plane slid across the logs and veered off to the other side, exploding instantly. The pilot drifted down with his parachute. Meanwhile, Korpi started loading his logs back into the truck. The pilot began shooting at him again. Korpi lost his temper and marched toward him. The pilot looked behind Korpi and suddenly started laughing. Korpi turned and saw a massive bombing plane approaching. Korpi shoved all the logs back into the truck, shut the back, and sped away. The pilot assumed Korpi wouldn't survive, but the bomber dropped explosives and some of them were about to fall on the pilot as well. Huge explosions blasted all over the area. Korpi spun his truck to avoid the blasts and then drove straight into the water with the truck. The truck slowly started sinking. Underwater, Korpi struggled to breathe. First, he pushed his dog out to safety. Then, he swam out himself. He saw all the logs sinking with the truck. Korpi dove down and untied the rope, freeing the logs. They shot upward with force, but while trying to free them, Korpi lost consciousness underwater. The logs floated up to the surface. His dog searched frantically for him. One of the logs lifted Korpi up, saving his life. His dog saw him, and Korpi slowly regained consciousness. He had saved his dog and all the logs too. By evening, Igor arrived at the site with his team. He asked what was down below. The guards said the truck was underwater. Igor asked whether Korpi's body was there. The soldiers reported there was no body and no logs. Korpi had already escaped with them. Igor said, "I thought he'd be tougher than this, but he still has a long way to go before he reaches Finland." Meanwhile, across the sea, as night fell, Korpi built a raft from his logs and reached the opposite shore with his dog. As he walked forward, he spotted a tank near the coastline. Seeing it made him genuinely happy. Inside, he found some weapons too. Korpi began attaching everything to the tank ready for battle. A short distance away was the Soviet-Finland border, and Igor had already reached the spot. He waited for Korpi because there was only one way through. Soon, Igor heard a sound and knew Korpi had arrived. He prepared to kill him. Korpi approached with his logs tied on top of the tank. Igor saw Korpi inside the tank and all the soldiers positioned themselves to attack. Korpi entered the tank's control seat and activated the cannon, then drove the tank forward. The officers fired at him, but Korpi ignited gasoline behind the tank, causing a line of fire. He drove full speed ahead. He'd also planted several bombs. When they detonated, the explosions hurled the tank across the border, landing on the Finland side. But before Korpi could move further, the tank's treads broke. He was trapped inside. Igor was thrilled. Korpi was exhausted and badly injured. Korpi took out a knife and separated its wooden handle from the blade. Then, he released his dog from the tank first. The dog crossed the border safely into Finland. Korpi collapsed out of the tank and Igor grabbed him. He was about to kill him, but Rek arrived with his men. They needed Korpi alive, so Igor dragged Korpi over and handed him to Rek. Then Igor said, "There's no place like home," and kicked Korpi unconscious. By nightfall, they loaded Korpi onto a train headed back to Russia. They hung him upside down and kept beating him as the train moved. Korpi lost a massive amount of blood from the torture. Reker approached and said, "Korpi, the legend of Finland, you don't know me, but I made you who you are. I've killed thousands of women and children and I don't remember any of them. Sometimes I remember their screams, but there was one boy I do remember. When I came to his house to kill his mother and brother, the boy stabbed me. That boy almost blinded me, and I recognized the wood from your house. That boy was your son. He was brave, like you. You should be proud. His attack made me furious, so I killed him, along with his mother and brother, chopped them into pieces, and fed them to the dogs." Igor could have stayed quiet, but he woke the sleeping lion again. Then Igor added, "I was never scared of you. My channel was scared, and now it'll torture you for days. I made you. I killed your family, and now you'll rot in our prison forever." Igor walked away. Korpi grew furious. Hanging upside down, he hooked his feet above and used all his strength to snap the rope. He fell hard to the floor. The guards heard the noise and rushed in. They played rock, paper, scissors to decide who would kill him. Earlier, Korpi had hidden the knife blade under his skin. After separating it from the wooden handle, he pulled the blade out. A guard entered to kill him, but Korpi attacked and tortured him. The second guard heard the noise and opened the door. Instead, he saw his partner dead. When he stepped in, Korpi killed him too. Another guard realized he'd die painfully, so he chose to jump out instead. Korpi tossed aside the guns and prepared himself for revenge. Meanwhile, Igor was forced to sit and enjoy dinner with Rek and the other generals, something he hated. Igor demanded his reward so he could continue his journey. Rek said he would get it, but first he had to party with them. They drank heavily. Igor was growing extremely irritated. At the same time, Korpi sneaked into another train car with his logs because Igor had loaded them into the train as well. He moved forward quietly where he saw a soldier sleeping. A soldier woke up, so Korpi slipped into another coach. Another soldier stepped outside to relieve himself and returned, noticing Korpi. He threw an axe and shut his mouth permanently. But then another soldier spotted Korpi, so Korpi stabbed him and ended him right there. Most of the soldiers were still asleep. Korpi slowly moved forward, but one soldier accidentally dropped a bottle of alcohol. At the same time, another soldier began waking up because of the sounds coming from the dead soldier behind them. Korpi hid below the compartment, but shards of glass kept cutting into his body as he crawled. His hand even got caught inside a mousetrap. Because of the noise coming from the dead soldiers, more soldiers began waking up. Korpi grabbed his axe and moved forward. He climbed out of the compartment with the axe and locked the door behind him. Then he checked the next coach. Inside, many officers were still awake. So, Korpi climbed onto the roof of the train and moved forward quickly. But there, an iron rod struck him, and he fell straight down into the officer's compartment. All the soldiers rushed to kill. But Korpi unleashed his speed and started killing the soldiers right there. He took a machine gun and mowed down one guard after another. The gunshots echoed through the train, and in the front coach, Igor also heard them. By then, Korpi had shredded every guard with bullets and was brutally finishing them. Igor came outside his compartment and saw bullets firing from behind. He immediately understood Korpi was responsible. Igor detached the main coach from the back ones and moved forward in the train. After killing everyone, Korpi stepped out, ready to kill Igor. But Igor simply said bye and escaped. Korpi saw something kept nearby. When he pulled the curtain, he found a missile inside. Meanwhile, Igor returned to Rek. As soon as he entered, he stabbed an officer, pulled out a gun, and killed all the remaining officers. He was about to kill Rek when Rek showed him the money and said this was what Igor had come for. Then Igor pulled out a shotgun and said, "This is what I brought for you," and he blasted Rek with bullets. After that, Igor calmly took a drink. Meanwhile, soldiers broke down the door and came forward. They saw their coach had stopped, and Korpi had already taken the missile and moved ahead at full speed. Igor looked at the money and was thrilled, but suddenly, everything around him began shaking because a missile was approaching fast from behind. Igor realized something was wrong. Korpi was charging forward with a missile. When he reached the train, Korpi stopped the missile, but its sheer force sent Korpi crashing directly into Igor. Korpi attacked Igor, unleashing all of his rage. Igor tried to overpower him and began beating him. Korpi was already severely weakened from the torture, so Igor slammed him to the ground and walked away with the money, but Korpi rose again. Igor grabbed him and tried to kill him. Korpi took the fork and stabbed it into Igor's leg. Igor then tried to kill Korpi with the same fork and even choked him, but Korpi knocked him down again. Igor then grabbed an iron rod and hit Korpi repeatedly. Korpi was drenched in blood. Igor said, "I thought if you came for revenge, you'd make a big explosion." Then he threw Korpi outside. The missile was still attached to the train. Korpi noticed it. Igor stepped outside. He asked Korpi if he had any last words. Korpi spit out a screw from his mouth, the same screw that had been holding the missile tied to the metal. Now, the missile was free. The missile shot forward, heading straight toward him, but it suddenly shut off and came to a stop right in front of him. Meanwhile, Korpi had detached the back coaches and fallen far behind. The train moved far ahead due to the missile's earlier momentum. Igor survived and was wildly relieved. But then the missile restarted and went straight into his mouth. A massive explosion followed. Korpi watched the explosion from afar, satisfied as Igor died brutally. 2 days later, at a train station near the Finland border, guards were sitting when they heard a sound. Armed with guns, they moved forward and found Korpi returning with his logs. The guards captured him. Korpi handed them his ID. They read his name and understood. This was Korpi, the legend. The guards saluted him. A few days later, Korpi was building a house with his dog using the logs he brought back. He was slowly recovering. His dog began barking. Some nearby villagers were approaching. Korpi prepared to fight them, but they said, "You'll need help with this work, so we came to assist." Hearing that, Korpi got emotional. No one had helped him in a long time. The villagers understood this, and they all stepped forward to help Korpi build his home. Korpi broke down crying. During the end credits, it is shown that all of them helped Korpi a lot, and together they finished building his house. And with that, this incredible film comes to an end.